Hello and welcome to the only podcast starting up a business with Mike Tyson building cars that run on corn called Cobb Vanth. I'm Luke.
I'm Max.
I'm Matt.
And this is Force for Thought.
Okay. I need to run that one back again.
The only podcast starting a business with Mike Tyson building cars that run on corn called Cobb Vanth.
Okay.
That's
right,
Luke, that's really good. That is also
There's a lot of moving parts in that.
There's a lot that we need to dedicate 5
Cobb
minutes to
Vanth was
that
the guy in the
intro
Boba
to.
Fett armor in The Mandalorian.
No, that part I
sheriff.
got.
Yeah.
That part I got.
The Marshal.
No, that was the
excuse me.
confusing part. I like that you said you needed a prop for that joke, and I 1000% agree. I forgot that you said that, and then you held him up. It really did it for me.
Yes, for a visual for a podcast we have a lot of visual gags, so all right. Well, hello and welcome back to Force for Thought. Today we are reviewing episode 6 of Skeleton Crew, Zero Friends Again, which I am very excited about. I, once again, really like this episode a lot. 6 episodes in, and I feel like it's still going strong, which I really liked. This episode was another character-heavy episode, which I really enjoyed. We got to see a lot more of KB, who is a character that we've been talking a lot about, and who we talked about in our last episode. So if you're just listening to this episode, I encourage you to go back and hear what we had to say about her in the last episode and probably the episode before that, because we kept questioning her and saying that we wanted to know more, and we were like, what is going on with her? Well, sure
Honestly,
enough, we
watch
finally got it. So it was very rewarding. I was very happy about that. It was not my favorite episode, not because it wasn't good, but because these character-based episodes are just not as exciting as the more plot-heavy episodes. So overall, I would say I like the episode before it a little bit better, but again, I'm kind of comparing apples and oranges because they just do different things, right? But overall,
Yes.
I really like this episode a lot. Luke, what did you think?
It feels like I am suckling at the teat of this show to give me some more lore drops on At-Atten and the way the plot's going to progress. And I'm just hoping for like a drop of milk from this udder, and then someone hands me an ice cream cone from the side. And it's like, hey, thank you. That's not exactly what I was looking for, but I loved this.
Can
This
you
episode
tell
did not...
our wives are breastfeeding?
It's top of mind.
I'm a milk guy. Who doesn't love a glass of milk fresh from the cow? This episode was good. I mean, I complained last week that it's progressing the plot but not progressing the characters, and this one progressed the characters and didn't progress the plot. So I would like to live in a world where we could do both in the same episode, and it would feel fine if this series was like 12 or 20 episodes, if we had a whole episode dedicated to characters and then a whole episode dedicated to plot. When it's only 8, I do feel more of an urgency that we should probably condense some of these plot lines into the same episode so that we can get more accomplished as we go. A lot of this KB stuff could have been addressed earlier. A lot of the equity among the group members and learning to accept people's differences and work with that could have been explored sooner. And I mean, I don't hate the show for it by any means. It's just at this point in the show, I would like to be doing more and faster than we currently are. But I still love this episode for what it is. I really liked all the development we got with KB and Fern, and I mean, all the Captain Silvo stuff was pretty expected. I figured he would convince them to go plunder At-Atten with him, but that was still fun seeing all that. Matt, what'd you think?
I like this episode a lot as well. I mean, again, kind of beating a dead horse with that statement, I guess, but this is that episode that clearly bridges the gap between the ending kind of act 3 of the show. Again, it's the payoff of what happens in the last episode. It feels like a 27-minute episode. It's not much happens. Even, I was thinking about this. Bryce Dallas Howard directed this episode. I think she did a fantastic job. She's a very good Star Wars director. I was like, I wish it was longer, but at the same time, I was like, well, the content didn't call for it. I think it deserves to be that short episode. I like the fact that the characters split up who we don't, obviously like Neil goes with Fern. I like that dynamic. I like that they're getting this true sense of adventure. The thing that I was a little iffy on, this is like whatever, is do you guys see the behind the scenes of like the crab monster, of how they put like the Millennium Falcon on it and stuff? You could see the Millennium Falcon like pretty clearly. on the crab.
No,
It's
I've only just watched the episode, so I
Okay.
didn't look at it in
It's-
too much detail. But that's
so
neat.
it's full of different like things from Star Wars lore, which I like to a degree. But then when you put the Millennium Falcon on things, it really hurts my head because I was like, are there other ships that are presumably the Millennium Falcon is not the only ship that is of that style, but it's the only one that we've ever seen. Because they also have an R2 unit on there as well as C-3PO. They said C-3PO, but it's obviously not him. But it's like those are fine because there's other droids that look like that. But it really hurts my head when you're like the Millennium Falcon's on there. But it's like, is that's not canon? Like that's not the Millennium Falcon. Like that's
It's
just a
not
fun
the
behind the
Millennium
scenes.
Falcon. I mean, I don't
Yes.
really know exactly what you're talking about.
It's just on the-
I didn't watch the video. I believe you that
Yeah.
those ships are on the crab, but yeah, it could be another Corellian YT 1300. There's no.
It
That's
just
not a unique
really hurts
to
my
Han
head.
Solo ship, but
Exactly.
that's a fun thing to include. I have no problems with that and the canonicity of it. That can be easily hand waved away. That's just another model of the
Oh,
same
no.
ship, and some
I
people would
agree.
like to
It's
see
just-
it.
It just hurts my head. Like again, I get it when it's like, oh, it's an R2 unit. But overall, yes, the episode's very good. It doesn't really progress much at all. I'm excited to see where we're going with the show in general, honestly. And one more thing, I guess, people are going to complain about it because I mean, this episode's been out for a couple days. I don't look at reviews and stuff until after we record, so we're not like tainted or something. But the biggest thing I think is that this has all the heart of what Star Wars should be, where it's got doing your best for the greater good, going with your gut, all of these things. It has a great resolution between KB and Fern. I think that is the heart of that. This show is just inherently Star Wars. It doesn't just have the title of Star Wars in front of it. It has, I think, all the themes. I think all the resolutions that we want. I think this just is one of the most Star Wars shows we've seen in recent years. It plays on, I don't think, any sort of nostalgia, which is funny. Star Wars nostalgia. It definitely is a nostalgia for the fact of an 80s Amblin movie. But I think it has like the heart of what Star Wars is. That's all. I don't have any other rants planned besides that one too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that. Definitely agree with the shortness of all these episodes. That week in, week out is always going to be my biggest complaint. I wish they did it a little bit differently. You're right. I don't want them to just unnecessarily make it longer if the story doesn't require it, but maybe release it a little bit differently. Maybe release it all at once so it's a binge, or maybe
Yes.
release like 2 or 3 episodes at a time. But I don't know. I don't
This
know
would
all the
be
business decisions behind it and stuff. It's annoying as the consumer waiting a week to find out what happens to AT-ATN and it's Captain Silvo going to get there and all this stuff. And then it's like, oh, we get basically 20 minutes worth of KB content, which is good. But now we have to wait a full other week. And it's like, come on, I'm getting impatient. Like, this is good. I want more. Feed me more.
It's a great chaser. This episode is a great chaser from episode 5. They just need to be released together. Is the only thing.
I wouldn't hate that. I see that.
You know when you get a cocktail and it comes with a sidecar? It's like half of a cocktail, so you just refill it. This is what this episode is, and it's just like just bring them out together.
That's funny.
That's what I was worried about with episode 4, I guess. On Akron, that I was worried the next episode was going to take place on at Akron at the time.
Oh,
to
yes.
go listen to our review, and it didn't. It went to this pirate Captain Rened's lair, who's the name of the planet I forget. Lunduna. Lanupa. Thank you. And this one did take place. Those 2 episodes on the same planet mostly. Captain Silvo did his own thing, but that doesn't bother me like it would have then, because these 2 episodes are very linked. And I guess that is a good point that you're bringing up, that it's that link that is good and necessary in terms of the structure and progression of the show, but that just makes it all the more frustrating that they're released weeks apart.
Yeah. And during the holidays, like the worst, like New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve are like the 2 worst days they could have potentially, almost, I would say debatably all year, release these episodes. Like any episode. Like
It was
it's
definitely
nice
I'm okay
inconsiderate
with
to
that.
podcasters. Yeah, they should
It
keep
was,
us
it
in
was
mind
a bummer
more.
for us
I agree.
personally. I think it was a good idea to have a Star Wars family-friendly show released right around the holidays, even though it didn't, pan out that my family was sitting around the fireplace watching it at Christmas time. I like to think other people were.
I was gonna say, if it's not us though, who is it? Because I'm just like, imagine the people that
That's
want
true.
to watch.
We are the most important people in the.
Is it your mom,
world.
Matt? Is your mom watching the show? Because I think it was the first episode, or maybe before. You said that your mom was really excited about it. Is she watching it?
Yes, she is, and she is not yet, but she will. But I think once the episodes are officially all released, because she's like, again,
Fake fan. I knew it.
original Star Wars trilogy fan, and so I feel like, growing up in that with that era, so I don't think she's hopping on yet. But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I don't even know where I was going. So
I'm very interested because I don't know anything. I don't understand the business of streaming. And it's obvious when a movie is released in theaters and it bombs. But something like this, how long do they wait to see if people come around to watch it? Because I feel like they canceled The Acolyte very quickly. So how quickly would they announce that they're not returning for a season 2 or something like this? Because I feel like this show has a high likelihood of getting the Solo treatment, where not a whole lot of people are watching it week in, week out, excited for the next episode like we are. But everyone who comes to it eventually is going to watch it, and they're going to be like, oh, wow, that was really good, right? And everyone's like, yes, we know it's good. That's what we were saying at the time, but people just weren't watching it at the time.
Working for a streamer now, I dig into a lot of the data on a weekly basis as well. And so a lot
No
of
way.
what we do now, it's not Disney, but or even close, but like I dig into that kind of data every week, where if we get we plan like, hey, this movie's going to probably do really well with our audience, blah blah blah, and then there's so many people that just are tracking that stuff, and if they're not playing well, plus the reception of it. So if you're getting any flack sort of on the internet, right, plus the views aren't doing well, I feel like you can almost tell pretty quickly, like halfway through the season, you're like, okay, it's not like, I mean, for us, like when we're looking at a movie, we're like, okay, 2 weeks in, and again, these are movies that are already out, but we're looking at something that's like did not do well the first week, and it's just not going to crack the top 50. It's it's not going to be a hit for us. But again, that's just my 2 cents on in something that I don't really have that much knowledge in.
Yeah, I feel like when stuff does get that treatment of like a hidden gem that people then come around to, it's more like years later than weeks or months later. Like
Cult classics.
Not even cult classics. I'm thinking of Avatar: The Last Airbender that got released on Netflix in 2020, and it was like right during COVID, and it was massively popular. It was like everyone's COVID show for some reason, and then it became such a big deal. And then Netflix started making a show, and then they released several more, or announced several more sequel shows in the future, and started doing more books and stuff, and it really took off. And that was 13 years after that show ended, 12 years after that show ended. And so I think like if something, and Solo hasn't even really taken off in that regard, I don't think either. I mean, just like colloquially, right, is all we've ever heard. There's fans that if you find the right community, they'll like anything. And as Star Wars fans, it's very easy for us to find the community that likes Solo.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's really taken off as much as it needs to, or as much as Skeleton Crew probably ever would in my mind.
And
honestly,
I don't think
it's anecdotal for sure. I don't know what the numbers are, obviously, but I know that it bombed at the box office, and then I guess it was when it would on streaming. But when would it have gone on streaming? Because it would have gone on streaming on Netflix first, because at the time Disney Plus wasn't even there. So I don't even
I watched it on Netflix.
But I feel like I feel like it was once it was put on streaming was when I started to see a lot more discussion online of people being like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad." Like people were going into it thinking that since it bombed at the box office, it was going to be bad. And people were like, "Yeah, no one said it was bad. Like we all liked it."
It became accessible, but then also I don't think Star Wars specifically will have those cult classics or whatever I don't think they're going to gain that traction, because there's still so much content being produced and coming out. All right, I think a lot of things like if they didn't make TV shows, we just got the two, we got Solo, Rogue One, the sequel trilogy, prequels, and original trilogy. I think then people are going to rewatch them because there's only X amount of content. But I don't think a lot of people are going to go back to Solo that are more novice viewers.
That too.
Because there's so much other content being produced.
Yeah,
which is unfortunate because it is great.
It's definitely going to get overshadowed by Andor Season 2, Ahsoka Season 2, everything else that's going to be coming out, right? Because when you look at something like Clone Wars is very beloved in the Star Wars community. I would say that's almost more of a cult following within Star Wars. I'm trying to keep it in Star Wars, so it's hard to kind of talk about all this. But the people who like Clone
No, I
Wars
agree.
really like Clone Wars, and that was not something that did well after season 1 or season 2. I mean, it was the only thing Star Wars was putting out at the time, and it was probably after like season 4 people were like, this is actually pretty good, right? And then it kind of
And it's animated.
Yeah, it was a
Obviously.
completely different medium, sure, but I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, but I mean, we'll see, right? Time will tell. So, but I do want to move on, talk a little bit about the episode, get into a little bit of the specifics. I kind of like to
Makes
go,
sense.
scene by scene, kind of talk about any sort of important points or notable moments. And this one might seem like it's a little more scattered because I want to start with the previously on, because there were 3 moments in the previously on where I was like, oh my gosh. Starting with the very first shot of the opening of the previously on, when we get that flashback of 33 saying that's the emergency hull demolition sequencer. Don't ever touch that. And right away, both Luke and I, because we were watching it together a couple minutes ago, Luke immediately was like, oh, I totally forgot about that. Like, if it's coming in the previously on, something about it is about to be relevant, right? So they showed us that right off the rip, and we're like, oh, okay. I'm glad that we caught that, because it was not something that stuck out to me the first time I watched it, and I'm guessing that was episode 2. I don't think we talked about it when we reviewed episode 2, so I thought that was a good call out, and an easy kind of way to kind of meta game the episode coming out. But then the other one that I thought was interesting was only in hindsight, when we saw that brief shot of Tak Renid saying that he has a ship clad in armor, because at the time I didn't think anything of it. I'm just like, okay, it's a ship, it's clad in armor. Like, Han Solo could say that about the Millennium Falcon and I wouldn't think anything of it until after I watched the episode and I started to put 2 and 2 together. And he's like, no, he's actually put armor around his ship, like an exoskeleton that they like crawl out of, like a snake shedding its skin. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was like right there the whole time. Like, that actually meant something. So
yeah, I never caught that until this moment.
That was, I like that a lot, that was in there. It was not something that I would have ever caught, maybe even on rewatch if it wasn't done a previously on. But like I said, those tend to give it away. And then the last one was when they had that line about KB being worried about corrosion from the steam, because we talked about that a lot last episode, because we were like,
I did not
KB's
forget that
deal?
part.
So yeah, as soon as that was on the previously on too, I was like, son of a bitch, they're gonna do it. They are gonna talk about that. Like, that wasn't a throwaway line. So I'm very glad that they went in and they were like, don't worry, we're talking about all this stuff. It made me very happy. And obviously, all 3 of those things did play a big impact in the episode. So I was very excited about that.
Not to jump ahead again, but mentioning KB and her getting her malfunctioning, the grossest scene to me, honestly, is when he like reaches into her head. I was like, is it warm in there? How does that feel? Like, I was like, oh, can you imagine being like he knows her on a different level. Like, after that, like, he was it feels inappropriate to say inside, but like it just, I mean, that's like a different level of knowing somebody is like, I was in the back of your head. Like, I was
there's no appropriate way to phrase that. He was wrist deep in that woman.
When he was trying to fix her and he was putting that piece back in, he was like, it doesn't fit. And I was so frustrated because I'm like, you just pulled it out of there. You know that it fits. Get it in there.
Just do the thing.
Yeah. But I'm just jumping around. I really like that scene where Wim saves her. I thought that was really cool. We got to see him kind of pour that mold in the sand, which was satisfying to me because that's a rabbit hole that I go down on TikTok all the time, is watching people make these molds in sands and then pour the molten metal in it or whatever, and then they pull it out. Super satisfying to watch. But then, like, they had the nice moment, right? And then he got to save her, and she was like, oh, I bet you thought it would be more exciting to save a life, didn't you? And then she called him a Jedi, and that was so nice.
Yep.
Both times I watched it, I was like, oh, that just brings a smile to me.
I loved when, in that scene, when he was like, oh, she's like, oh, that was close. He's like, close to what? She's like, total shutdown. It was just so funny. Like, I think he knows the gravity of that situation, but like, her saying it is almost like scarier or more real. It was so good.
I was really stressing out when that scene started about the details of it when she called it a micro fuse, because I've used circuit boards and played with fuses before, and they're already pretty small. And now this is a Star Wars fuse, and it's a Star Wars micro fuse. I was like, oh my god, it's going to be like the size of a toenail, and he's going to have to like get it out. And he got it out, and I was like, oh, that thing's fucking huge. This shouldn't be a problem.
as an electrical engineer, you were like, oh my God.
Have you ever tried replacing a fuse on a strand of Christmas lights? Like, that thing is so hard to get out of there. Every time you spend 20 minutes on it and you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to buy a new strand. They're like $5.
There's a really funny, I would say TikTok, but this was like maybe 10 years ago when Instagram like was just
Vine,
coming up.
the OG.
Literally, it's with Patrick Thomas Lennon, your friend that you met at Comic-Con. He was like, you ever get these extra Christmas lights and know what to do with them? He's like, you think it's gonna be an instructional video. He's like, throw them the fuck away. You're never gonna need them again. I was like, yeah, that's exactly. Like, I'm not gonna spend the time doing that. I'll spend $10 more.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not gonna hurt my fingies.
But I really liked that scene. I also, I was a little skeezed out when that little tray popped out of the back of her skull. And we got a little more background. She said, ever since my accident. So she had some sort of accident. So presumably she was fully human. She had an accident and now she has these augmentations that is having her, I don't know if she's a cyborg or a hybrid or whatever. I don't know what you want to classify it as. But she is clearly depending on these electronics for her life, and seeing that thing pop out of the back of her head really just made me wonder what this accident was and what damage was done to her, that part of her body is just completely gone. You know what I mean? Like, that's more than just like a fall down a stairs or something like that.
This is not a hand getting cut off. Again, was it covered by insurance?
Like affecting her,
probably.
It's not just like affecting her brain or her spinal cord. It's like replacing her brain or her spinal cord.
And the way Fern drives to school, I mean, I'm not super surprised.
I mean, yeah, KB doesn't seem to mind doing that still, so.
I don't recall.
Oh, no, I mean, that's probably what caused it. Exactly, yeah.
If it caused it, though, then surely she wouldn't still be doing it.
Or she doesn't remember. I don't know.
Oh, God.
That's interesting.
No, I don't think that's true.
I have a feeling she would remember, but I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get any more details as to what the quote-unquote accident was. I think that was kind of all that we're going to get on that, and I'm satisfied with that. It just really made me wonder what exactly happened. But yeah, I really liked that part a lot. And then, okay, so kind of going through the episode, so they kind of run down that slide. KB's augs start to go off. I like that they call them augs, too. That feels like a good Star Wars word. I feel like that wasn't a term that they used in the Book of Boba Fett, but it kept making me think of it because they were the mods. And I was like, it seems like the same thing, but it's not. And I feel like the difference is they don't want to be like the Book of Boba Fett. But that's all I'll say about that, because Luke doesn't like it when I shit on the Book of Boba Fett every episode.
That is correct. But going back to the slides that you glossed over, it's kind of a shit booby trap for Captain Rened, don't you think?
Yeah, I think we were all definitely expecting spikes at the bottom of that pit.
We mentioned that last week, that we were expecting spikes, but this was nothing. It was a slide. It was a ride.
So
you can easily climb back up.
If anything, kind of fun. I'd give it a whirl or two if I were Captain Rened.
But exactly, was it a failsafe versus a booby trap? Was it his way out? My question to you, because that's what I viewed it as.
Well, then why would he bait it right in front of the feast?
I don't know.
That's a good point.
That's a good point.
How many? I mean, how many deadly booby traps would you put surrounded by yourself at all times? Though I'm a clumsy person, I would assume that I'm going to trip at least one of them weekly.
Yeah, that's
knowing you, Max, let's bump that up a little bit. And double it for me.
I like the sequence where Jod and 33 escape, and he's confronted by all the pirates. All the pirates seemingly all survived. That, I guess, must take a long time for that acid to set in.
Yeah, I was waiting to see a shot of their
red shirts.
I was waiting to see a shot of their little piggies on the bottom of their feet, see if they were burned, but they didn't.
Just their clothes up to their shin were just burned off.
That'd be funny. They're just bones.
But I thought it was a good comedic beat where Jod was trying to talk to him, and then he was like, 33, attack! And then he just slowly climbs out and gets shot immediately.
I also love how the treasure
to not see. Oh, sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just gonna say, I love how the treasure doesn't really look like treasure. There's like so much turquoise going on in there. Just kind of look. They went to like an antique shop in like New Mexico.
I was bummed that we didn't get much SM-33 this episode. I will not say we got none at all, because we did get that beat, but it's pretty close to none at all, and he's probably my favorite part of the show so far. So that was a bummer.
I mean, we only got a little bit more Jod content. After that scene, we just had the one scene of him being given equal time during his pirate trial, and he convinces everyone that he knows where Atten is, which was a fine beat. You know, it kind of played out the way that everyone, I assume, thought that was going to play out. He had that little song, though, about Tak Rened finding Atten, which I thought was cool. It was pretty haunting.
No, you know what I loved about that scene was the Ovician, who is the Bulio species from The Rise of Skywalker. He was like standing next to Brutus because we've seen a few Ovicians in Star Wars. The first one in The Rise of Skywalker, Bulio, the guy that gets his head cut off that says, "Win the war," to Finn. And I like that character design, or creature design in The Rise of Skywalker. And then the Ovician gunner was in Battlefront 2 after that, and he looked the exact same as Bulio. And that trope happens all the time with Star Wars Aliens, where you have a great creature design, and then several different characters of that same species look the exact same. The Trandoshans, every Rhodian, the Aqualish, most Quarren. The Trandoshans have been getting like a little bit better, but barely. But this Ovician looked completely different, but still obviously Ovician, and I really appreciated that. They could have just probably used the exact same character mask from The Rise of Skywalker, but they made it satisfyingly different enough for me. And most people, I feel like, will not care about that, but I really do.
It's the small things. And also, that's Vane, correct, from Mandalorian? Not just a different person. Okay, has anybody else... I feel like I've been duped in the fact of that I was thinking that he'd be a significantly bigger part of the show. I don't really care that he's not, but I felt like they were like, oh, that, like, I feel like that's when we first were talking about Skeleton Crew. It's like, oh, but Vane is going to be in the show, and that's when they're introducing him in Mandalorian. And now he's even more of a minor character than he was in Mandalorian. And I'm just
he
like,
barely talks. That's just a function of the 24-hour news cycle, or whatever you want to call the equivalent in Star Wars, where you clamor for any bit of news, and it's like, oh, this new show that we know nothing about with these new characters that we know nothing about, but Vane is in there, and so that becomes the headline. And it's like, yes, so that's funny. One of the people in this group, but that does not mean that he is going to be major, but we have to report it as such.
It's just so funny, though.
Vane has taken a major backseat to Urkel's pirate, who is also a very, very, very small-time pirate. I think this episode he had the most dialogue that he's ever had so far, and even that was 2 lines.
That's what's confusing, I think, a little bit. Again, not a bad thing. It's just what I'm, again, kind of deep diving into that, is being like, shouldn't that be Vane? Unless Urkel dies or Vane dies, because it feels like the equivalent of like a character is introduced as a minor character and then they go off on the spin-off show and that's like their main thing, right? But this is like reversing that. It's like he was kind of a big part of Mandalorian, and then now he's just he's in the background. He's like he got downgraded from reoccurring to background. Like it's just confusing.
That is confusing and funny, but I love that the more we talk about it. I think this is so funny. And no matter how you cut it, all of these people are just fodder for Brutus, who is by far the most captivating one of the pirates, and they know what they have there.
Correct.
yeah, he's good. What I liked about that scene also was when Brutus introduced him and he said something about the so-called mad Captain Silvo. And in my head, I was like, I think you're the only one calling him that. I haven't heard anyone else call him that. Brutus is trying to start a thing ever since the mutiny. He's like, come on, guys, we all call him the Mad Captain, right? Mad Captain Silvo. And everyone's like, I don't know.
He's got a million names already. Brutus, reel it back.
I also like that they needed a generic Star Wars name for Jod to call out to one random pirate, so they just named him Glurb, because I feel like that's what is that? That's a Star Wars name, but like you gave it zero effort. Like
it's also great
because the little first letters that came onto the page when you were writing something.
In a show of so much intent, that is just very funny. To like you couldn't do that in like another show. It'd be like that doesn't seem. But this is.
I feel like it's the equivalent to doing that in a real show, but being like Bob, you know, and it's like,
exactly.
All right.
I was gonna save this for my Force for Thought, but I remembered I'm not bringing the Force for Thought tonight, so I'll talk about it while we're here. The plasma hourglass, also.
That's the best part of the show. Yes. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot it. I've been dying to talk to you guys. Yes, it 1000% is. I cannot believe I forgot. Sorry, Luke. Go on. So
no, you go ahead. It actually seems like you have a lot more to say about it than I did.
He was very excited.
I get very. I don't get as excited about background things or like as you guys do, right? I mean, that's a bold statement. Not sure that's true. This excited me so much because it is again it's a thing that we use in our real life, right? Every board game. Can you imagine having a mini one of that in a board game? I loved being able to see that. I was just like, what is the functionality? What is that substance? Is it a screen? Is it a liquid? I don't know. I just loved the way it looked. I loved the way it glowed. It was one of the coolest normal things in Star Wars I've ever seen, to be honest.
I'm very glad they name dropped it too, because I was also thinking, and I had to stop myself from overanalyzing it, because I was like, but they have sand in Star Wars. So we don't need to over-engineer this.
Is plasma
but I'm
more
okay with
common
it.
than sand?
Yep. There's no way. No.
But is it?
But who
is
knows?
Is
Maybe
it plasma
somewhere.
as like a liquid, or is it plasma as a screen?
Does it go between
still
a
use-
solid and a liquid? Is that how they get it to start? They just start melting it and then it starts to drip?
That's what I'm saying. And if it is a plasma
like a
screen,
siphon.
which I know it's not a plasma screen, it's just really funny to think about this, is that if they stop the clock, that if they start again, if you left it on too long, it'll stay frozen. Remember that? When you used to have plasma screen TVs, and you pause it for too long, the image would get burned
It
in.
burns into
Yeah.
It's like,
that's
what
so
time
funny.
is it? Anyway, sorry. I loved that though. I was thinking about that all day. I cannot believe. And I said I didn't have any other rants planned. That was a lie because I wanted to talk about that. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
Well, good. I'm glad they did that. I like to think that someone in the crew was like responsible for the hourglass, and they brought in just a sand hourglass, and Bryce Dallas Howard was like, "Who the fuck do you think you are bringing this boring shit around me? Get out of here."
That was that person's one job, and he just really nailed it out of the park. He was like, "This is going to be my claim to fame," and he's listening to this podcast right now, being so vindicated. Like, I told you they're going to love it. I knew it.
And you know who it was? John Dykstra. He hasn't worked on Star Wars since 1977, but he wanted to come back to do that one thing.
Dykstra.
No, it was probably Sarah Halley Finn that casted the blue plasma.
That's the
It
magic
definitely
touch
was.
that she provides to the Star Wars world.
Just no misses ever.
No misses. All right, and then so we had the moment where Fern and Neil are climbing, and then the ship starts getting taken to the trash dump. Luke, I think you really like that part. And then they kind of jump on the ship, and they start to drive it over to rescue their friends who are being attacked by that giant crab monster that we talked about. I don't think you said this, but Matt, did you know that was practical effect, that was all done via stop motion? I thought that was cool.
Yes, I did love that aspect. That's I watched a little behind the scenes thing on about how
Was that
everything.
the Skeleton Crew special look? I saw that on Disney Plus. Okay.
I believe so. Yeah, it was. I didn't see it on Disney Plus though, so I'm just gonna say yes though. But yeah, it's cool. Everything had like a purpose in it. I also don't like crabs, crustaceans. Just freak me out. I don't like the word. I don't like seafood. I didn't like that. Freaked me out. The fact that when they're like, "Oh, I think we're food," nightmare for me.
So you'd have been Team Fern, not follow the crab people.
I also don't like heights, so
I was
it's
about
really
to say,
a
that's a
lose-lose.
catch-22.
How did you feel about the crab people in Ahsoka on the planet in the other galaxy, Peridia?
The Noti.
Yeah.
Yes, not a huge fan. But they're more sentient, so
They're
less
more
creepy to
sentient
me.
and they're more turtle-y.
Yeah, so turtle, fine, right?
Well, turtles and crabs have got to be semi-related in this sphere of yours, right? The ability to be in a shell. I don't know.
No, I don't think it's less of the shell. It's more of like the pointiness. I don't know. Like crabs aren't cute, right? Turtles can be cute. Give
That's
you
true.
salmonella, but are cute.
I just know you're a huge fan of Master of Disguise, so that's why turtles are fine for you.
I favorite Dana Carvey movie.
I did not particularly love that sequence. I think what you're thinking of, Max, is how frustrated I was with myself when we were watching it together that Wim and KB have found themselves in the junkyard where they take all the garbage, and I didn't put it together yet that's obviously where they're going to be taking the Onyx Cinder because it's a piece of garbage, and they made a point to talk about that in several episodes, and especially when they landed on this planet. She said we might have to call sanitation or whatever, and I didn't put it together until they were on their way, and I just felt like such a moron.
They're giving us all the clues beforehand. You know, it's on us for not knowing this. When they were talking about their plan, though, and they were talking about climbing, I was at first with KB and Wim, But then I saw that they were climbing a ladder, and I was like, oh, it's a ladder. Like, I
Yes.
thought you were going to be
I thought
scaling the
they-
side of a mountain.
Right.
I agree. I would have went ladder, by the way, for sure. What would you guys have gone? Crabs or ladder?
Ladder.
If I
To
know
climb
it
a
was a
mountain,
ladder, yeah,
I would
I'll
go
take the
crabs.
ladder.
But
Yeah, we would be a good team. We should start.
especially, I mean, even Neil was complaining that he's got little stubby arms and he can't reach the next rung, but he's doing pretty well. Like, that's still better than hanging out with crabs.
And hoping that's like running into somebody like a hitchhiker and being like, "Take me here, please," without murdering me.
Yeah, it's
I'm not
definitely a situation where you feel bad, but you're just like, try harder. Like, you can do it. Stop bitching. All right.
But
Also,
that
how
is
did-
perfect for the episode of Wim's naive optimism. Be like, oh, something will come about. And Fern is like, no, this is definitely the right way to go. And maybe it was a little bit of both. And that's what the whole episode was about.
Yeah, and a little bit of
Or when-
ableism in there as well.
Wynn says that too, which is great. He's like, "Why do I always get the bad guys wrong?" or whatever. That was such a great line. Or why do I
Mhm.
always get who the good guys are wrong? I don't know. I'm getting this line wrong, but
There-
I like that moment.
There was that line when the X-Wings showed up, when they had to point it out that they were like,
Yeah.
Kim said they're called X-Wings. And it's like, all right, we know. You didn't have to say that.
No, they don't know. I would like to that. Or at least I didn't have anything wrong with it.
We, the
I guess.
audience, know that. I'm saying as a matter of writing, there's no benefit to us knowing that these are X-Wings. We know that they're X-Wings.
And also great eyesight for them to see it that far. I could barely see planes in
Well,
the
most
sky.
of this seeing is being done by KB, who has augmented vision, we can say now.
That's true.
That's true. I also I liked the moment where it cut back to the kids and KB was just like getting her oil can or whatever so she could move again, and she was still laying on her back, so she was looking up and she saw the X-Wings first, and it's like, that's a cool moment, but it's not like you wouldn't have noticed the X-Wings if you didn't happen to be looking up. Like, they were having a dogfight in atmosphere right above you.
It's a normal day.
That's funny. All right, and then we get to the part where they fly over to the dump where their ship crash lands, and it's being eaten by this giant trash compactor, which was, I said it off the top when we were talking about the previously on, but just a really cool moment when they were trying to get away and they couldn't and everything was going wrong. And then you think like, she's like, all right, we're going to give you like one last boost or something to get us out of here, that it's still failing. You're like, oh, what are they going to do? And then they point out again, oh, the emergency demolition hull sequencer. And it's like, oh, of
Yes.
course.
I had forgotten that by this point also, and they got me.
But not knowing what that meant and then seeing it happen, it was just so cool and satisfying. And I was just like, all these things were clicking together. Like I said, when Tack Rened said that he has a ship clad in armor, and it's like, that's like, they're just like peeling away from the armor outer shell, basically. I don't know. It was really cool. I liked it a lot. When I was watching it with Luke, you shouted, oh, now it's sexy. And I'm like, yes, exactly.
It wasn't as powerful as The Last Jedi, when you don't know how Luke is doing this and you don't know how he's surviving all these AT-AT shots, and in your head you're trying to figure it out and you're like, no, this is dumb, he can't just have god powers and survive it all. And that's kind of what I was thinking when they were detonating the hull. I was like, okay, so we're just gonna detonate so that it gets the monster off but not blow up the ship and then they can leave. And then it worked out perfectly, and I was like, oh my god, everything comes together, and it gave me that same sense of incredible satisfaction as when I watched The Last Jedi. That was a great sequence.
I 1000%. I think I was going to say, you mentioned Last Jedi. I was going to mention Rise of Skywalker, where I feel like the Wayfinder is one of those things that was just, in the special features. Max and I always talk about this. They're in the midst of filming and still figuring out what the Wayfinder looks like, what the Wayfinder is. And to me, it's like, obviously, that's not the best way. I wouldn't put that in special features or even admit that. But I think something like this aspect of the ship is obviously so thought out beforehand that we have nuggets dropped throughout other episodes leading up to this that are like, again, you could not even catch on to those nuggets and it's still so satisfying. But the fact that it's there makes it rewatchable, makes the show feel more cohesive and whole. Like, that is what, again, that's what Star Wars should be, is inventive and also like tell the audience what the thing is without them knowing it. Again, there's something to again, it's like a little on the nose that like, never press that button, but it's like, but it's the type of show that couldn't get away with it. And I just love that contrast between Rise of Skywalker and this.
Yeah, I love that too. I also liked the scrap monster that was eating the scrap. When we first saw the establishing shot, I thought it was already impossibly close for the kids to go run up and start the ship and get away. But then it was moving really slowly. But then I got to thinking, would you rather have something really close but moves slow, or something twice as far away but moves twice as fast? And which would be scary? And I don't really know. What do you guys think?
Wouldn't it be scary if it's moving, if you're really close to it, but it's going fast? Or very far away?
Well, yes,
and
that is the
slow?
scariest option. I mean, it's moving really slow and it's close, or it's twice as far away and moving twice as fast. So, like, it'll get to you in the same amount of time, but which would be the scarier experience? To have it start closer and move slower, or start further away and come up on you?
I think closer too. I think. Well, oh man. I really don't know.
Really tough.
Having anything closer, I feel like, is inherently scarier. But then I also feel like anything that's just moving slower is inherently not. I would still say closer is scarier.
Where's the final destination? Does it reach you at the end? Like if I'm facing an animatronic, like I'm thinking if I'm on a ride, as you guys know, animatronics, one of my biggest fears. I would like to be as far away as possible from it. If I'm viewing it, and it's like it can be as fast as it wants to be, as long as it's far away. But if it gets close to me and it's fast, that's the worst of both worlds.
What if it's right in your face but not moving at all?
See, I don't like that. That's basically basically the drop in Universal with the T-Rex at the very top.
Let's say you're in
Not
a spaceship and it's coming to devour your spaceship, and it's pretty close but moving slow. Would you rather be twice as far away and moving twice as fast?
Well, if I'm in a spaceship, that's a different story because I'm in a protected
Man, I'm just laying out the scenario in the episode. I'm trying to keep this as simple as we can.
I still don't know.
In this exact situation, would you rather that monster have been twice as far away and moving twice as fast, or the way we saw it?
I think it'd be slower because I feel like you have more time to escape as well if you need to.
I feel like you don't process how fast it's moving, though. You only process how close it is. So that's why I think it's scarier the closer it is.
I think it's scarier closer in this instance, because depending on the predator, it would be scarier for a cheetah to be like running at you, but if it's just kind of close and then moving closer, it kind of draws you in. But this does not. This I would want as far away from me for as much time as possible.
Yeah.
Okay. I was confused how that's the one part of the show. Actually, we were talking about how it's a shorter episode. But them getting to the ship, I felt like could have had a couple more beats to it. That's where I think we could have bulked up by even like 2 to 5 minutes. To be honest, I felt like they were like, "We got to go to the ship," and then it's like, "We're on the ship," pretty quickly. I felt like, again, if you had to put scenes in, that's the only place in the whole episode that I feel like could use a bit of
but beats
up.
to establish what? Like more character development, or we knew they were going to get to the ship.
More danger. That's all. To be like, oh, there's things along the way.
I was satisfied with the danger from that scrap monster. If they wanted to bulk up the show, I think they could have included a scene from at Atten with the parents, which is always a treat when we see that. It's not like I'm dying to see that story develop, because I think it'll mostly happen when the kids get back to the planet and the pirates. But just a little reminder, a fun little antic or quirk like we saw last week would be nice.
It's just Wynn's dad at his desk typing for 2 seconds.
I kind of forgot that we didn't see any of that this episode. There's only 2 episodes left, and I wonder how much more we're gonna get, because we're seeing enough of them back on the planet. Like, we know that they're trying to do stuff, that presumably they're going to do something. Like, I don't think it's all going to be a red herring where they're just like, we got to get the kids, and then they do absolutely nothing, and they just kind of show up at the end and they're like, oh, you guys are back. Okay, great. We were just about to storm the supervisor's castle or something like that.
I was thinking about that too, Maxwell, like in the fact that, like, again, we don't know, miniseries, TV show, whatever. It's so confusing, to be honest. But with this show specifically, it doesn't feel like they have so much lore that I feel like the story might be finished, but I feel like there's so much lore to explore still. Like, if the kids remain back and Silvo is like, okay, here's like the treasure or whatever, it feels like that can be wrapped up, but like there's so much mystery around the planet and the supervisor and this world and what happened to the other places that I feel like they could easily do a second season to to explore more things. But I just like you said, 2 episodes left. I'm very interested in a lot of what's going on.
They probably could, but I'm very optimistic with this show based on, like you said, how it just feels very well thought out, that this one is going to end on a satisfying note where everything will be resolved, right? And it's not going to like leave us for a cliffhanger. It's like, oh, but if you want a season 2, we can come back and do this. And it's like, no, just tell us the single story and be done. Because like you said, you can always come back and, flesh out the lore in a second season or something like that. Just finish the story. But I think that is going to happen. What I'm curious about after this is how this is going to tie in, if at all, with anything else happening in the Mandoverse at the same time. Because the Filoni movie is supposed to serve as like the capstone to this whole like thing. And so I'm wondering, is Jod, as a Force-sensitive pirate, going to make an appearance at some point as a redeemed good guy? Is he going to be another, Force user along with Ezra and Ahsoka taking down Thrawn and his army of witches or anything like that? Because we're not seeing anything outside of the galaxy, but keep in mind, that's where we left off this galaxy, with Thrawn returning on Dathomir. And we haven't heard anything about that yet. Now, we wouldn't, because it's set on Ad-Atten, which is isolated from the rest of the galaxy. But that is kind of like a backdrop. I mean, like, you can kind of keep that in mind as you're watching Skeleton Crew, that contemporaneous with all this is this whole movement of Thrawn and the return of the Empire and all this kind of stuff.
Contemporaneous, crazy word drop.
Was that the right word? After I said it, I was like, I don't think that was the
Oh, geez, I trusted you. I'm sorry to bring attention to it now if it wasn't. I'm sorry.
So did I.
I think it worked. I think it worked. We're good. We're good. I'll edit.
I think,
yeah, just cut that then.
Like you were saying, Max, was like, I think something that the show's trying to do is being like, hey, we've seen scoundrels like Han Solo before, and they turn good. I honestly think that the show's trying to be like this. Maybe he isn't very good. He is a pirate that is a bad guy that cares about himself. I feel like that might be just kind of the basis of that, whether it's something bad happened to him before. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't, again, I think genuinely cared about the kids and stuff too, but like, he knows that the kids are going to be responsible, or he's going to lead a planetary invasion, basically. Like, he is, you know what I mean? He doesn't care about anything else. He is going to lead a planetary invasion to steal their gold and stuff too. So their credits rather. So I feel like the show might be trying to say that a little bit. It's like, hey, maybe not everybody can be good. I honestly think so. If within this Thrawn world, he is definitely going to thrive in ripping people off, I think, to be honest. Like, I don't think he's going to save the day as a Jedi or go, team up with Ahsoka or Ezra. I think he's going to be off by himself, stealing things while people are looking the other way while things are happening. As the battle's going on, he's stealing credits out of people's pockets.
I'd be fine with that, just to see him all in the same thing. It would still be exciting for me.
With that being said, yes, I do want to. I think he would be perfect for that movie. And Jude Law is just a star power name.
I think in terms of limited series or continuing show, I don't think we'll get a season 2, just because the show is set up to resolve so cleanly. Like, with The Acolyte and Ahsoka, those were, and Andor for that matter, like, all these shows are set up for multiple seasons, for better and worse, and you get towards the finale, and like, I'll use Andor for an example because we never have anything negative to say about that, but at episode 11 of Andor, it's like, okay, everyone's set up to come back to Ferrix and have this massive climax, but then what about his sister and growing up on that planet? And there's nothing like that with this show for me. Like, they got the planet, they got the ship, they made it sexy. KB knows the coordinates, Jod knows the coordinates, he's got his pirate crew, everyone's heading to Ad-Atten. We got 2 full episodes to resolve everything with the parents, with the supervisor, any of the lore, any of the pirate stuff. I'm feeling very confident that I will be satisfied by this show in one season.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think Ahsoka is the best example of that, because as much as I love Ahsoka, it is probably my least favorite season ending of any Star Wars TV show, just because I felt so unsatisfied with that. Like, it was all just set up for season 2. And I was like, that's really all I wanted to know more about, actually. So that, like something like that, is a good example of what I agree with you 100%. I don't think they're going to do it for this. I think this is going to have a clean ending. I think it's going to be good. If I were to guess, I'm assuming it's not going to get renewed for a second season, but they'll be happy that it's getting good reviews and like it's generally positive. I haven't heard like a overwhelmingly negative discourse about this show at all, which I've been very happy about. Luke was preemptively upset going into this show that everyone was going to complain about the child acting. I haven't seen anything complaining about it. I have never been taken out of anything in the show so far by it. So I think they're doing it all very well. I think the show's very good. 2 episodes left. I'm excited to see what happens because, like I say, we kind of talk about these character episodes and these plot episodes. So far, I feel like we've had good character episodes on Neil, Fern, KB, and now the 2 most important characters are left, and there's 2 episodes left. So I think we're going to get some good Wim and Jod content coming out of the next 2 episodes, which makes sense that that's going to be the climax. But overall, I'm super excited. I'm still very, very high on the show. I think it's very good. Any other closing thoughts, Luke?
Yeah, I agree with what you said about Ahsoka. It just stings so much more now in hindsight that the thing everyone was most, or at least the 3 of us were most excited for, was the Baylan Skull content, and then it was all set up for season 2, and then Ray Stevenson died, and so that just stings all the harder. But yes, Skeleton Crew is looking good for a finale, and this episode was good, not great in terms of the other 6 so far, but I'm excited for the finale, the next 2 weeks, I guess. God, I wish they would just release them in 1 week, but that's okay. I'm excited for the next 2 weeks.
Same. Same thing. I honestly, most of my time will also be talking about Ahsoka for 2 seconds, in the fact that it's such a paradox.
You can't just talk about a new show and then expect us not to talk about it.
I know. Yeah, I should have paused
exactly.
there. It was time.
No, Ahsoka's a paradox because everyone's biggest question was, where's Ezra? And then you find out where Ezra is, but then you kind of want, at the same time, you want Ezra and Thrawn and the Baylan Skull content all to kind of wrap together and resolve. And instead, they gave us a little bit, and we're like, okay, Ezra's there, but now what? But I just wanted them to do it differently, which is weird saying that because I also loved the show, so it's confusing. Hu Yang. But anyway, yes,
I got a new Hu Yang toy for Christmas. Santa brought it to me.
It
Nice.
looks awesome. Does he look more like jacked in that figure?
No, I'm sure it's just the way you're seeing
it.
He looks good.
Yes, I'm excited for the show. I'm really liking Skeleton Crew. Very excited for the next 2 episodes. So, yeah.
That brings us to the conclusion of our thoughts on the episode today. Does anyone have any force for thought to leave us with?
I do have a force for thought.
Sorry, I just want to say at the same time you did as an echo.
Son of a bitch, Matthew. This one, it actually comes courtesy of Empire Strikes Back and some of the online community. I was looking at this
I've seen
conversation.
This one, okay.
People were talking about What If, the Marvel What If series, and how Star Wars should do their own What If series, and what are some interesting prompts that they could explore. You guys are shaking your heads. I agree. Overall, don't do a What If series.
No, don't do it.
Don't do it.
They were asking, like, what prompts do you think would be fun to see in a What If series? And one of them really I thought about quite a bit, and it was, what if Luke never went to Bespin? And I was like, oh man, that's such a good prompt. Like, what would be the butterfly effect coming out of that? And then the more I thought about it, I'm fairly confident it would be nothing different. Luke did absolutely nothing. He did not save his friends at all. Han still got turned over to Boba Fett to take to Jabba. Leia, Chewie, 3PO, and R2, who ended up showing up just because Luke was there, still escaped, but only because Lando had Lobot ambush them, and then they got out. Luke didn't save them. And then Luke went to go fight Vader, and he got his hand cut off and found out some disappointing news. So really, Luke would have been better suited having never been gone to Bespin. Everything would have played out the exact same, other than Luke would have been better trained to fight Vader in the future, and he wouldn't have known that Vader is his dad. But I don't think that information helped him. If anything, that was probably a setback, because then Vader was just in his head for the next movie.
So I guess the question would be, would everything else, if Luke doesn't go to Bespin, does that butterfly affect what everyone else does? Which then in turn, like, just say Luke does something else with Han Solo, which makes him inactive, or goes with Leia, which makes her inactive. So I feel like potentially him not going could affect the other character storylines, and then in turn would affect the story.
But at what point would it affect them though?
I don't know.
Have you guys seen Into the Spider-Verse? What's it called in that? I assume you have, right?
I've seen the first
movies?
one.
Me too. I haven't seen the second one yet. Very excited.
I think it's mostly in the second one. It's like when an event happens that is so crucial to the fundamentals of that universe that it has to happen in every universe.
Yeah,
it's like an anchor event.
Anchor
And
event. Yeah. That was in something else too. I think that was in other
it's
Marvel
true.
stuff.
Wolverine.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. No, that was an anchor being. But this is an event.
Same thing.
And I feel like, I mean, from a meta way, writing, obviously that's the way the story goes, but also in universe, I think it was just it was going to be stagnating at that point until Luke decides to go to Bespin, because Han Solo would not have been frozen in carbonite and they would not have escaped until Luke comes. That's the catalyst that starts all of that in action. I think Vader would have just tortured Han forever until Luke shows up. And then once Luke starts showing up, then we can freeze Han, test the chamber, and start moving stuff along. But I think everyone's places would have remained exactly the same had he waited an hour or a day or a year.
But why? Are you saying just from like a writing perspective? Like, are you saying
in
Vader
universe,
knew when
canonically,
Luke was coming?
Vader knew when Luke was coming. Because that's why he was torturing Han, to draw him out, and that's why he stopped torturing Han, because
he know when
he showed
Luke
up.
was coming, or did he just know that, like, oh, I'm doing this, so I know he's going to come?
I think it's the second one. He will come because I'm doing this, or he'll come either way.
Well, it might have been.
Point, Luke.
I think it doesn't matter either way.
So then the better prompt would be, what if Luke had gone to Bespin sooner? Because then Han could have never been frozen in carbonite at all. Luke could have just showed up immediately, and Vader would have been like, oh, this is all I need you for. Boba Fett, I don't give a shit about your bounty. I just need the Luke.
You gotta account for traffic.
Yeah, that'd have been nicer.
It was during rush hour. He had to wait a little bit.
He's like, well, I might as well just have lunch here at the office.
Right. It's one of those things you're like, oh, it's going to take me just as long, or I'm going to get there at the same time either way. It'll just take longer because of traffic, so I'll just leave later. Yeah, I say that every single morning on my way to work.
I think whether Vader stopped torturing Han because he knew Luke was coming, or he stopped torturing Han because he knew Luke was going to come based on the amount of torture he had already done. I think if it took 10 years worth of torture, then he just would have tortured him for 10 years, and nothing in the universe would have changed.
Besides their age.
What if he never goes to Bespin? If he never goes to Bespin, then I think Leia, Han, and Chewie die of natural causes on Bespin. Or Han, relatively unnatural. Or he probably would have started torturing
relatively
Leia.
unnatural. He's being tortured, by Vader but for 40 years. So naturally he'd be dead.
I think but that's the whole point, though, is if Luke doesn't go to Bespin, I don't think he's Luke Skywalker. I don't think his morals are the same. I don't think
well, yeah, all that.
But, to be honest. Well, I think that's the biggest thing. Is like that's just not the same character.
No, it wouldn't be. But I'm just thinking about the implications canonically with everyone else, or like the rebellion and the Empire. I don't think they would have done anything.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on, Luke. I'm just saying, I think that if in this prompt to what Max said, I think that's
going to Bespin is what made Luke Skywalker, then what impact would it have made on the universe if Luke Skywalker was the Jedi that Obi-Wan and Yoda wanted Luke to be? Because Yoda didn't want him to leave. So what if Luke was devoid of attachments? That's a more interesting prompt, because now I think the only reason Luke was successful was because he wasn't true to the Jedi doctrine in that sense, right?
That's like caging Paul McCartney or John Lennon in the fact of like, hey, you can't go experience life, but you can only write these amazing songs. But the only reason you can write these amazing songs is because you experience life. I think that's the same thing, which is a really weird example, but I feel like that is smart. Is I don't think that. Yeah, think about that. I feel like you're.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening at all. I was thinking about what Max had said before that, because it was Dave Filoni was talking about that at the celebration. That's what Luke did better than Yoda and Obi-Wan, because Yoda and Obi-Wan failed in literally the exact same task that they're trying to set Luke up for, and Luke succeeded where they failed because he was able to choose his love of his father and his belief that his father can be good where Obi-Wan and Yoda could not. So if Yoda and Obi-Wan got their way, I think it would have been another L, but because Luke was different and not what they wanted him to be, they succeeded.
Yeah, correct. I agree.
I'm going to be thinking about this for a while. Not to toot my own horn, but I think that was some excellent force for thought. Thank you very much. All right.
Yeah, I'm going to be chomping on that. That's good.
Honestly,
Let us know what you think.
This is my favorite episode we've done on the Skeleton Crew, to be honest. And also, I think it's the longest episode for the shortest episode of the show.
Yeah, I was getting ready to make a comment towards the end of the episode that we have less to say about a shorter episode, so it shouldn't be a surprise. But turns out we had more to say.
All thanks
I think
to that.
because we went in a million different directions, though. We're just like, oh yeah, we could dive deeper now.
I think it was
talk about
entirely
Ahsoka
due
whenever
to the,
we want.
I think it was because of the plasma hourglass. That really helped us get there.
Best thing Don Dykstra has ever done.
All right, we'll see you
Thanks
guys
for
later. Let
listening.
us know.
See
Reach
you
out
next
to
week.
us. Force for Thought across socials at gmail.com.
That's us. See you, Sammy.